Welcome back to WrestleSpective, your home for everything obscure, forgotten, and defunct of pro wrestling. In October 2024, ring announcer Samantha Irvin left WWE. She wanted to focus back on her music career since WWE didn't see her in any other role. The responses to her exit online were, of course, completely normal and not at all unhinged. But just a few months earlier, after WrestleMania, she was being praised for her work. I personally thought she was great. Anytime I watched a WWE show, she always gave the big matches a bigger feel. In a business dominated by men historically, Samantha Irvin with her incredible talent was able to excel because of the road paved for her by women like Brandy Rhodes, Lillian Garcia, and someone you may have forgotten. This is the story of a second-generation talent, a trailblazer, the first woman ring announcer in wrestling, Mike McGuirk. Michael Kathleen McGuirk was born in March 1958 in Oklahoma. She was actually born into the wrestling business, as her dad was legendary wrestler and promoter Leroy McGuirk. Like most wrestling kids, McGuirk was bullied in school at times for her dad's chosen line of work. She was taunted with the usual jabs of wrestling being fake. But just like all those other wrestling kids, she defended the business fiercely. She was also picked on for her name, Michael. For a time in school, McGuirk simply went by her middle name, Kathleen. Being the daughter of a promoter like Leroy McGuirk obviously led to quite the interesting upbringing, but to Mike it was just normal. Even as a rebellious teen craving a normal family, Leroy reminded her that they were a normal family. He worked hard to provide, and there was nothing more normal than that. Mike also grew up with that constant question about her future. Would she become a wrestler? In the 60s and 70s, that was really the only way for a woman to be involved in wrestling. Sure, Christine Jarrett had been a promoter around that time, but that wasn't at all the norm. But that was fine by Leroy. He didn't want Mike to get involved in wrestling anyway. Like all wrestler parents, he knew the hardships of the road and the toll that a career of bumps can take, and he didn't want that for his child. In the mid-1970s, Mike attended William Woods University and Oklahoma State University, graduating from OSU in 1978 with a broadcasting degree. By 1982, Mike McGuirk was building a pretty successful real estate career, while Leroy McGuirk would see his promoting career come to an end, after signing a non-compete with Bill Watts. Not long after her dad got out of the business, Mike would get a very interesting opportunity. In late 1984, Leroy and Dorothy McGuirk were contacted by the WWF. They were coming to Oklahoma City and needed a ring. Leroy had the non-compete agreement with Watts, so Mike decided she could provide the ring. She had nothing to do with her dad's non-compete deal, so she set them up with a ring for the show. Over the next couple of years, whenever WWF came to Oklahoma or the surrounding area, Mike McGuirk would get the ring, run the music, and even sit ringside as the timekeeper. She wasn't full-time in wrestling, but she was happy to keep the McGuirk name involved in the business in some way. However, on a fateful day in 1986, everything would change. In September, while helping at a show in Memphis at the Mid-South Coliseum, she was approached by agent Blackjack Lanza. They needed a ring announcer. So at the last minute, McGuirk stepped inside the ring that she brought in front of 5,000 fans at the historic venue, including her parents. McGuirk hadn't done anything like it since college. There was no training for the role, there was no class at developmental to teach her how to be a ring announcer. But thankfully, she had that broadcasting background. And even more beneficial for her was having grown up in the business. Mike said that she thought back to all the ring announcers she'd heard in her childhood, and remembered wishing she could understand them more clearly. She wanted to really hear the wrestlers' names, hometown, weight, etc. It was important to her that the audience could actually hear what she was saying, so that became part of her style. The woman in a men's tuxedo impressed WWF officials so much that she was brought on to do the honors at house shows across the Midwest, and as far out as New Mexico. McGuirk would also produce the local promos when not ring announcing. In August 1987, Mike would be given another major opportunity. This time it would be on the air, sitting in on commentary. See, back in April of 1987, WWF took over the Houston Wrestling TV on Channel 39. The show was still presented by former Houston promoter Paul Boesch, but now featured WWF matches. Bosch's deal with Vince was a mess right from the beginning, so in August of 1987, all parties involved decided it was time for Paul to retire, and Vince would make sure he went out with a bang. All the top WWF stars were on the card: Junkyard Dog, Ted DiBiase, and Hulk Hogan. WWF also brought in Houston attractions like Tom Pritchard, Chavo Guerrero, and Mil Mascaras. And on the call for this monumental night, former Houston wrestling employee Bruce Pritchard, the Duke of Dorchester Pete Doherty, and Mike McGuirk. She had made history. The first woman to provide commentary on a pro wrestling show the whole show. She wasn't a guest for a match or two. She was on duty the whole night.
You see the slicks on the outside of the ring, a little bit worse for wear, but it gave the one-man gang the advantage that he needed, Mike.
Absolutely. What he did, he let his heart speak, and he went for slick and forgetting about the gang, and the gang saw his opening and took advantage of it.
McGuirk and Pritchard would call the action with a rotating cast of third members from most WWF Houston wrestling broadcasts. Some of their matches were even featured on primetime in All-American Wrestling. By late 1987, Vince McMahon replaced localized TV for the Houston market with his standard syndicated show, ending McGuirk's commentary career before it really even got going. She would continue to run ring crew and announce on house shows, but by April 1988, she was tapped to be back on television, this time as a ring announcer. Again making history on an episode of Wrestling Challenge, the show would air on May 1st, 1988, where she introduced the likes of Bam Bam Bigelow, the Rougeaus, the Honky Tonk Man, and Bret Hart. Starting out in a black men's tux over the course of the next few months, McGuirk began expressing her style a bit more, with tailored fits and colorful jackets that were impossible to miss while she walked out of the ring. Mike has said that her wearing tuxedos was one of the few points of contention she had with Vince. Her defense being that, hey, it's what the men announcers wear, why not her too? According to McGuirk, aside from this minor disagreement, her relationship with Vince was incredibly collaborative, and he was almost like a second father to her. And it wasn't just Vince that was looking out for her, so did Sherry Martel. It's important to remember that back then, the only women that were at TV consistently was Miss Elizabeth, Mike, and Sherry. That was it. Sherry would find them an empty office or broom closet, anywhere for them to get dressed and just have some privacy from the boys. Mike was certainly around some rowdy behavior, but according to McGuirk, she was never harassed or bullied by the locker room. If anything, the boys were encouraging. Not everyone was as supportive, unfortunately. Howard Finkel was pretty salty about her role in the company. But to be honest, it sounds like it wasn't a gender thing, it was more of a Finkel just being generally miserable about anybody else having that job kind of thing.
You know, let's just, you're you, and which is great, and there's room enough here, because he wasn't doing what I was doing. Mel was doing it, and I eventually took over his spot, and but it was also something, and this is Vince. Let Vince be Vince, you know, and right. Don't blame me. Go talk to Vince if you don't like it.
But McGuirk persevered and kept making herself better. Her announcing style would quickly evolve over the first few months. You can almost hear her become more confident over time, with her voice settling while still booming.
Weighing with a total combined weight of 479 pounds from somewhere in Latin America, here is the Conquistador!
Conquistador somewhere in Latin America, perhaps even South America, as Matilda's ushered out of there. And the bell's gone and we're underway.
South America could be Atlanta.
And his opponent, weighing 242 pounds.
This guy's a dangerous individual.
By 1992, McGuirk was the primary announcer for Wrestling Challenge, but still had matches aired on Superstars in primetime. And again, you could hear the difference as she truly found her voice.
And his opponent.
Well, you never know.
Weighing in at 265 pounds, and hailing from Pembroke,
Keep your mouth shut, Ray. No one would know how stupid you are.
Oh, they'd know.
Well, I guess they would.
She also became a hard-to-miss fixture of programming, even having interactions with wrestlers and being on the receiving end of some Bobby Heenan zingers.
The following contest
Here comes a trainer.
Mike McGuirk's a traitor?
No, Rick Martel.
Obviously, in reality, the two were friendly and the brain was just being the brain. I don't know about anyone else, but when I think about my Saturday afternoons watching wrestling as a kid, I don't hear Howard Finkel's voice in my head. I hear Mike McGuirk. Her introducing the Beverly Brothers, the Texas Tornado, Papa Shango, and others. She even introduced The Undertaker while he was still Kane the Undertaker.
I was very impressed with him at Survivor Series, weren't you?
You bet.
Come 1993, the landscape of the WWF was changing drastically. The company had grown immensely from 87 to 93. Producers, accountants, talent relations, and other corporate roles now filled the company. Then there were the lawsuits, federal investigations, and talk show exposés. McGuirk has said that all of this created a distance between her and Vince. Instead of getting orders and feedback from him directly, it was being sent through someone else. All of the lawsuits and the upcoming federal trial was also taking a toll on the WWF's bank account. At some point in 93, Vince told her that he couldn't afford to fly her out from Tulsa anymore, and that he wanted her at the studios in Connecticut, meaning she'd have to move to Stamford. As a single mom of 2 kids at the time, McGuirk decided it wasn't the right decision for her family, so she opted to leave the WWF. Her final TV appearance would air on Halloween, October 31st, 1993, and she would officially depart the company in 1994. McGuirk has addressed the persistent rumors that she'd left because Vince made a move on her. She's repeatedly stated that it never happened and that her leaving was entirely based on not wanting to move, and deciding it was time to be at home with her kids more. But that doesn't mean that it never happened to any other women. Fortunately, Mike was able to leave the company on seemingly good terms. She's visited backstage a few times, and her son Max even had a developmental deal in 2009. Today, Mike McGuirk again works in real estate and makes occasional appearances at conventions and even breaks out the bedazzled Basler. Today, Mike McGuirk works again in real estate and makes occasional appearances at conventions and even breaks out the bedazzled blazer from time to time. While Mike McGuirk says she's not an activist for women to have roles in wrestling per se, she does believe that given a chance at any spot in the business, that women can do just as good a job as men. It would be another 5 years until a woman took over the role again, when Lillian Garcia started in 1999. And it wouldn't be until 2017 and 2018 when women would return to the commentary desk on a more consistent basis, with Lita calling the Mae Young Classic and Renee Young getting the call for Raw. Mike McGuirk opened the door for people of all backgrounds and identities to pick up a microphone or put on a headset at all levels. Why not a woman ring announcer? Why not a black woman like Alicia Taylor with WWE? Why not an Asian woman like Jade Chung in TNA? Why not a woman commentator? Why not an LGBTQ commentator like Veda Scott? Why not someone who can do both and in Spanish if needed? Why not a woman like Dasha Gonzalez with AEW? There's no restrictions on who can do what in wrestling anymore. I like to think a small part of that is because of Mike McGuirk's work almost 40 years ago. I know that WWE likes to pretend that the audience doesn't remember anyone from more than 5 years ago, but I'm really surprised that they haven't brought Mike McGuirk back for an old school night, or for like the Evolution show, anything. Maybe someday. She's certainly deserving of recognition for blazing the trail she did. Let me know in the comments of other overlooked figures in wrestling history you'd like to see get the spotlight here on the channel. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Watch wrestling, love wrestling. Thanks for watching.